Hey, everybody, you're listening to the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Brian Pittard.
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm Caleb the Wonder Cub.
And we are your hairy, heavy homos that talk about comics. But you don't have to be a hairy, heavy homo to listen or tune in. I've got to get a more streamlined way of saying that. So we're back with you for another hour plus, whatever it's going to end up being, where we talk about comic books. For many of us that you see in this little configuration here, it was a very rough week and a particularly rough day. So that we have an outlet like this was something we were all very happy to keep in mind as we trudge through what was a pretty shitty day. So I also have to make an apology because the audio episodes are way behind from the streaming episodes. And if you're tuned into me as a friend, I did have a valid reason for that. I wrote a play. I haven't written a play in over 20 years. The last time I had work produced was off Broadway, I think was in 98 or 99, like around that time. So I had an idea, and it was an idea that I just had to keep churning and refining and distilling and getting onto the written page. And I was worried that the ideas would just split. So that did take a little bit of my priority over the last 3 weeks when I did have downtime, but I haven't had much downtime either. Hopefully at some point before the end of the year, I'll have a Zoom experience together with a couple of actors, much to the frustration of a lot of my friends that are around my age. The characters that are in the play are in their mid to late 20s. Which doesn't matter so much for reading, but, no, there's no part for you.
Meh. Well, good thing we're going to spend this entire time doing a full table read, so let's get started. We all have our copies.
So if you see the music here behind me, the play is about a new wave club in late 1985 that after a few years of success and 1 year of not so much success, they decide to close their doors. And you follow the four co-owners as they plan the last shows at this particular club. Given that it takes place in the mid-'80s and that there are LGBT characters, it does touch on AIDS. And there also are some ghosts in the rock club. So it just seemed to be something that was a germ of an idea, and it gelled more and more as I kept thinking about it. So hopefully there will be some form of it out there before the end of the year that people can at least sample. So I'm excited. I haven't done this in a long time. Yeah.
That's very cool. I'm very excited to read it or see it read.
At the very least, before the end of the week, there will be a Spotify playlist out, which I've called a play playlist, which are songs that either are an inspiration to the play or actually fit within the framework of the play. So,
what do you think? Yeah, Jeff Lemire putting a playlist to your work.
Not to a play.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so
not to a play.
That's cool.
I think they did. I'm trying to remember if Dave Abersol had done that with one of his, but I mean,
I don't know.
Awesome.
I mean, it's been done before.
I love it.
That's cool.
I want to know the things that both pair with it well and or were inspiring it being created. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah. I always get and that's one of the reasons why when Jeff Lemire did that for for Royal City, especially like every issue, what to listen to, what the playlist was, that kind of thing. I love it. I get really geeky about it because like Brian, I'm like, what were you listening to? What was your inspiration? Is something from a song in your work? And that's kind of cool.
Well, I just think that helps you figure out where the writer's head's at, because so many of us connect music to a certain headspace.
Yeah.
Especially now that we live in the age of like curated playlists, it's easier to put together. Like I've got, I still use Pandora because I live in 1992, but I've got playlists that are absolutely, and they span all kind of genre, but they're absolutely curated to what mood I'm in and what I'm wanting to put out. So that's just one of those things. Like I love when artists do that.
Artists like our very own William Zanowitz.
Oh, stop. Stop. No, it's interesting because, I studied playwriting. I had a play produced when I was in college called Phoenix, some of the other plays that got produced, Dust to Dust, The Black Chuckle. There's one called Majesty that never was produced and never could because it would cost like $17 million. Think of an Arthurian buddy picture, but as a play. All right. So it was too big.
Get one of those rotating stage table things and just have them trek. There you go.
Bill's like, no, it says the Hope Diamond. Get me the Hope Diamond.
It turns into Alexis from Dynasty.
We did have a reading of it once, though, and it turned out better than I thought it would be. I knew that there really wasn't a future in the form that I had it in, so I just put it aside, you know.
It might make a good comic someday.
It wouldn't make a bad comic, but you need like an artist like a John Bolton or one of those classicist kind of looks to make it work. All right. Well, you said the word comic book, so all right, Steve. Why don't we start with you? Tell us about something you're reading and you're digging.
Well, this is something that I saw before Quarantina hit, and I was instantly intrigued. And then, of course, after what usually happens in these kinds of things, when you see when a controversial title or character change or whatever somehow draws the ire of or the notice of mainstream journalists, and it makes headlines for Forbes or for whatever Variety, things like that. And this is The Death of Nancy Drew is the comic that I'm talking about today. It's actually the first 3 issues of the first 3 parts. It is a 6-part series, and of course, when it was first solicited and announced, a lot of people just hooked onto that death of Nancy Drew and were like, how dare you kill off Nancy Drew? Plus, it's a team-up title with the Hardy Boys, which means, Nancy Drew doesn't even get top billing in her own comic. It's the Hardy Boys. This is blah blah blah. It's like, okay, you're hooked on the title. Obviously, they got you talking. Maybe you should actually read the book rather than just kind of talking about it. So I did that. I was intrigued. And the first issue originally was solicited, I believe, in April. Obviously, it was not released by Dynamite until about, I think, the early part of June. So as of now, there are 3 issues out, 3 parts. And just to kind of give you an idea of the plot, it is a team-up book. It's a crossover title, but also sort of like an alternate reality for these beloved book characters. These chapter book characters that we've had around since at least the middle of the century, and also throws in some interesting other appearances by other beloved mystery-solving teens. But essentially, the first part opens with Joe Hardy coming back to Riverside, which is the home of Nancy Drew, because she is dead. She was presumably killed in a severe, rain-slicked bridge, car going over the bridge into the water. They pulled it out, and, the body was, waterlogged and clearly dead. So poor Nancy Drew is dead here. But Frank isn't having it. Joe isn't having it there. So he lets us know that there's a lot more backstory to this. Apparently, the Hardy Boys' father had been killed by by an organization called the Syndicate, and Nancy had helped them out in finding out, who was behind this. In fact, Nancy's own father, Carson, was targeted by the Syndicate and blackmailed into, using his legal abilities to, get people off, or represent people who represent people who who were very shady characters, and unfortunately, he was also targeted for elimination because he got on the wrong side of the Syndicate. But Nancy solved everything. In fact, she even found out who the Syndicate was run by, and none other than Richard Bobbsey and his older twins. I think it was who are the older Bobbsey twins? from that other book series that's been around since 1902. And so there's a lot to unpack in this. But obviously, the Hardy Boys know that there's something up here. At least, Joe definitely knows that something's up. So he tries to investigate what's going on. He visits, Nancy's father. He visits Mary Bobbsey, who supposedly had nothing to do with the syndicate, and tries to find out, what's going on. Well, of course, leading into part 2, he discovers Nancy has faked her death. And this whole thing was to kind of take herself out because she knew she was being targeted, and solve the mystery. Who is running the syndicate now? So she can completely core it out and get everybody who needs to be behind bars. She calls up and works with Joe Hardy, so they're all working together. Frank, of course, gets brought into this, and in doing so, they investigate and find out that there's something going on with the Bobbsey accountant, the barber, who supposedly is doing more than just cooking some books. And of course, when they confront him, he attacks them. He takes off part of Joe's ear. And also turns out that the barber may be targeting the new mayor of the town, Ned Nickerson, who is Nancy's ex-boyfriend, who's trying to get some new business from overseas to come and invest in the town. So there's a big fight. There's a whole bunch of craziness, and the barber's shot. But who shot him? And who had hired him to kill Ned Nickerson and also target Nancy? Was it Mary Bobbsey? Is it Nancy's own father, who apparently is in a relationship with Mary? It could be anybody in this thing, but of course it's probably going to be Mary. But it's exciting. It's fun. It's like reading a very adult version, or possibly a Riverdale version, a CW Riverdale version of Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys and the Bobbsey twins. I love it. It's exciting. It's fun to read. The words in this are being done by Anthony Del Cal, who is writing, I guess, from his own original idea. And then also the art is done by Joe Eisma, who, I love Joe Eisma. I'm very partial to him. And I think this is actually a perfect venue for his artwork. I love the style, love the way that he puts his panels together. And then also, interestingly enough to note, Crank is doing the letters and Salvatore Ayala the colors. I'm not really familiar with either of their work, but interestingly enough, each part is told from the perspective of either Nancy or one of the brothers. And in doing so, all the word boxes, the narration boxes, are all done in different colors to denote which brother or Nancy is talking. So it's pretty cool. It's exciting. I really recommend it. It is coming out monthly, and the second half of the series is about to get started in September. So pick it up if you're interested. Dynamite is putting it out, and I know that Dynamite's been through a lot of controversy recently, but this is probably the least controversial of their controversial situations over the past year. So I do recommend it. Death of Nancy Drew.
All right. When you were given that description, all I was hearing was Riverdale.
Yeah, very Riverdale.
All I was hearing was Riverdale.
Very Riverdale, except without the schmoopiness and shirtlessness.
Well, and
there's not any of that.
It's funny that you were talking about Joe Eisma. Not funny, but there's something about this type of material that I think attracts Joe, because he did the covers for like Jughead the Hunger. He's done a lot of the Archie-esque, not the main line, but he's done a lot of work for the Archie stuff. I think the interiors were done by Veronica and Andy Fish, but he's done a lot of cover work for that. So there's something about this that type of mid-America subject matter that I think draws him in.
Yeah, and I think also the age group, he seems to do pretty well with that particular thematic age group, sort of a older teen, early 20s, young adult sort of style. In fact, Engine Word, I think, is probably the first book that I read of with his art where it is purely adult, at least at this point in the story, because it just started. But Morning Glories, it's a private school for assassins, essentially, / multi-dimensional magic, whatever. because who knows what happens in that book. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed it, and it was not something I knew what to really expect. So pleasant surprise.
Did you grow up reading those books?
I've read some Hardy Boys, not a lot, and maybe one Nancy Drew book when I was pretty young, and none of the Bobbsey twins. But I know enough about them through sort of general cultural osmosis that it wasn't too bad.
I was an encyclopedia.
I was totally an Encyclopedia
I'm waiting for
Brown.
him to show up. I'm waiting for Encyclopedia Brown to show up.
Well, but isn't that much later than the other stuff they're referencing? I feel like it's like that.
I mean, the Bobbsey twins there were original
version.
books for the Bobbsey twins that were published between 1902 and like the late 70s. And Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys, have been published since the, through the 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, there's still new books that come out in the series every, so often. So, and with, of course, the new TV series on the CW that premiered last year, Nancy Drew's kind of come back into sort of general.
It looks like Encyclopedia Brown was 63.
It was much later.
So I mean, it's like a little later, but that I feel like that's why even though it's huge for a lot of us, it wasn't associated with that same.
Yeah, but there was. I mean, if you had cable
in
the 80s, there was that Encyclopedia Brown TV series.
It all collapses. Yeah. Oh yeah.
No, I was saying the same thing I
saying?
did to check, and I saw there was 63. And plus it was like a little bit of a different sensibility. It seemed, from what I maybe read 5 Hardy Boys books at most, but it seemed that they were like very quaint. They were like actual murders that happened in those books. Where Encyclopedia Brown it seemed it was below felony. A lot of the things that happened, but I also found Encyclopedia Brown far more relatable.
Well, yeah,
maybe because of the age too, because he was much younger.
Yeah, and usually those books were collections of sort of short cases. They were
very quick reads.
An entire book about that, and of course Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. It was always Nancy Drew and the mystery of the exploding library, or the Hardy Boys and the pirate that just wouldn't die. It was. They were almost like Scooby-Doo, but more serious, with actual death as opposed to,
with actual death.
With actual death. And no dogs. No dogs.
Okay, before we transition, I realized that we did not do a T-shirt roll call.
Oh.
So let's start with you, Steve. What do you got on?
Well, speaking of Scooby-Doo, it is, and I think I may have worn this before, like months ago, but it's the Peanuts gang as Scooby-Doo and the gang. Zoinks and Jinkies.
Love it.
Okay. Brian, how about you?
Barnacorn.
And you, Caleb?
I got some Wanda.
I love it.
Scarlet Witch.
Well, I wore a free comic book day shirt last week. I decided I'm going to keep doing it. So this is the Jim Lee one.
Oh, nice.
2012.
Nice.
Yeah. So there you go. All right, Brian, let's throw it over to you. What's a book that you're reading that you're digging?
Okay. I feel like this is going to eventually evolve into like the shirtless edition if we keep going. So anyway, sorry, random thought. So I read Strange Adventures, and this is the somewhat new, I think they're on, I read issue 4 today, of the new Tom King, Mitch Gerrard's, adding Doc Shane or Evan. I can never say his name.
It's
right.
Doc Shaner, but it's Evan Shaner.
Evan is his Doc. Yeah. So if you're not familiar with Tom King and his modern comics sort of run, he has been doing these. I won't say deconstruction, but a little bit of a deconstructive element into these different characters from Marvel and now DC more recently. Vision, of course, was his big like foray, with Marvel. Bringing like that Vision as a house, as like a married. Oh, sorry, I got a plane coming in. As like a house husband with a family of his own creation, it turns out, and the dark turns that kind of devolves into in a very suburban environment. Then he did Mr. Miracle, which It's still one of my favorites because I'm a New Gods fan, but deconstructing and kind of bringing new interest to Mr. Miracle from the New Gods and his ascendance or his death. It's a little ambiguous, but there's lots of conversations that can happen with that property. But then, of course, he did some like event thing, Heroes in Crisis, which I love, but a lot of people were kind of like, it's not my favorite thing. So this is his. So Mitch Gerrits did the Strange Adventures, or I'm sorry, the Mr. Miracle series with him. So he's back to do this.
Did he also do the Sheriff of Babylon with him?
Yeah.
Was that Gerard?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Forgot. I mean, I'm just keeping his main stuff, but Vertigo series. Okay. They eventually want to come back to that as well. Eisner Award winning, I believe, series.
Also did some of his Batman run as well.
Yeah, he jumped in occasionally for his Batman run. Of course, that's a great, huge, work that he's been. He just got off of like last year, like fairly recently. Okay, so Mr. Miracle kind of set the tone for these kind of pieces. I think the Vision to some extent, but in the DC era, he brings new life to certain characters, and kind of brings them into this modern, murky, ambiguous morality world that we're in, that we all live in. And Strange Adventures is just like that. If you're not familiar with Adam Strange is this Silver Age character, sort of a space adventurer, gets zapped on a Zeta beam over to Ran, which is a planet far, far away of alien, but mostly human-looking aliens. And this series is that with Adam Strange having like a press tour related to this big victory he had on the world on Ran, and also kind of conjoined with this investigation by the Mr. Terrific, the more modern incarnation of Mr. Terrific, who's investigating because the Justice League has suspected there's some sort of something missing. There's some kind of either conspiracy going on with Adam Strange and Ran, or maybe some of the accounts coming out of Ran suggest there was more going on than just a victory over this alien species, possibly something more like a genocide, and then possibly related to the death of Adam Strange and his wife Alana's daughter. And so you have in these first 4 issues various pieces, and it's jumping around in time and it's jumping around in style. Between Mitch Gerrits, a little more sketchy, although his style does seem to be tightening up a bit compared to Mr. Miracle and other stuff he's done, with Evan Doc Shaner's sort of more traditional, cartoony, beautiful renderings of some of the great DC heroes. Superman's in this book, Batman, Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, Green Lantern. Trying to think if there's any other well-known whatever, but bringing in all these DC properties to kind of contrast what Adam Strange is dealing with, trying to understand possibly how he's been manipulated. This is where until the end of the series, and even then you may not really know exactly, but it's exploring themes of fighting in a war that you are possibly like being earnest in your own your reasons for fighting. You're a soldier, or you're trying to save the world, but really behind the scenes it's so much more complicated than that. You're potentially having the government manipulate you, people in your life sort of filling you up with jingoistic notions of saving the world, and how much of that is reality and how much of that is manipulation, and then the whole idea that warfare is messy, and that even if you think you're on the right side of a war, there are people on the other side of that war who absolutely also think they're on the right side. So all of this is coming in. It's very modern. It's very resonant with some of the Trump administration stuff, in terms of the sort of callous nature of manipulations. There's this whole scene and I think it's this issue, it may have been the last one, where Alana is in this like ceremony of this warring people, and it's to save her. It's like Adam Strange versus this alien warlord, Clint, which I kept reading as Clint, and like the manipulations going on with this ritual, how both sides seem like they're doing it for the right reasons, but there's this like, it's part of this tradition, and oh no, this is the way we want to do it, and like the monologues that this alien warrior gives, and how he really sees this as a succession of ideas and of generations that he is like the latest edition of, and how he's protecting his people by doing this. Like, it plays with a lot, and the art is brilliant. The two people, Mitch Gerrits and Shaner, like, they are just top tier artists doing some of their best work here. Is anybody else reading this?
Yes. Yeah,
you eventually will, Bill.
Eventually.
But I mean, so Steve, what do you think about all this?
Oh, I think it's such a really interesting concept, and I think having Tom King working with both artists gives you that delineation between what is Adam Strange's perception versus what is the grittier, more likely, possibly more realistic version of the events and interpretation of the events, because basically everything that's happening now is Jared's, and it's very much tied to Adam's perspective, but then of course Mr. Terrific comes in, and throughout that Adam's sort of remembering things, and he's retelling sort of information of his idea of events, and it's hard to say. It's hard to say or if it even matters, who's right or what the real story is, because,
the
either
cost
way,
is the same.
The cost is the same. Yeah. Adam's he's the one who's paid the price. Well, he and his wife have paid the price. Their daughter is dead. Thousands upon thousands of people are dead, in this war. The damage, the psychological and emotional damage has been done.
So I pulled up a page from this. This is Doc Shaner, again, just highlighting the stylistic differences. Very clean lines, beautiful. Like, I mean, that howl is just so perfect. I love it. And then you go, and that's sort of more Shaner. You go here, and sorry, I'm pulling it up on Comixology, and of course it's buffering. But the Mitch Gerrits style, as we'll get to here in a second, is just a lot. So there's your Mitch Gerrit, and the other thing it's exploring is sort of the pop culture sort of phenomenon of war and warriors. And so not only do you get these talking head moments, which, Tom King is a very big fan of, like, Alan Moore and Talking Heads, Batman. Oh my God, my brain's not working. For 300, who did?
Frank Miller.
Frank Miller, thank you. The Talking Heads, like, little reactions, and even though that's like pretty, much older, that is still a huge thing in our culture, and dealing with politics and warfare is a big thing. But what I love about this one is there's two great panels in this that I love. The first one up here, there's a woman dressed up as Adam Strange in his outfit, but sexified, and it's a pop song that is being sung about him and his deeds, and it's funny because Mr. Terrific down here is like, he's on Rand, and he's investigating, he's trying to figure out what's going on, and that's a whole great example of government's obfuscation of reality, and the whole victors write the history. His reaction is like, it's a great song, but it's horrible that it exists. And then there's another panel in here I'll find here where Mr. Terrific, and this is totally gratuitous. Oh, there's another Shaner Superman. I mean, if you don't think that that's like just like perfect and amazing, like I don't know what you're thinking. But the there we go. So shirtless Mr. Miracle here, or shirtless Mr. Terrific here. I mean, I've not ever been a Mr. Terrific, like, it's like he's interesting. He's like the smartest guy in the room. He's got the little floaty spheres. He's all about fair play, which is a thing back to the previous Mr. Terrific. But he's pretty hot in this. Like Mitch Gerrits should be commended for his sexy Michael. What's Michael's last name?
Oh, Mr. Terrific is, Jesus. Why can't I think of it?
Not Michael Knight.
No. Oh, why can't I think? It's on the tip of my tongue.
It's because I just said that. But like, obviously, like, look at this, like, gorgeous, like, ridiculously gorgeous man. And was it in the New 52? Didn't they make him gay? I feel like
no,
okay,
no. Michael Holt.
Michael Holt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought at one point there may have been a queer influence here, but yeah, because doesn't
No.
he
No, he
loses
was
wife?
actually connected with Power Girl.
Well, but he
and
lost his
Kara.
wife at one point too, right? That was
Yeah,
like
and
his wife was killed, and Kara.
well,
Kara
that's central to his development.
Yeah,
that's true.
The
Yeah,
death of
so
his wife, and also the
sequence is
we don't have
great.
to talk about Mrs. Terrific right now.
He's singing the song and getting dressed, and I mean, again, I actually think this is a page I might want to see how much they're. I don't know if it's I don't know Mitch's process. I feel like he's traditional, but and yes, James just reminded me here. Mitch Gerrard's is very easy and very bearish individual.
Got a nice beard.
Yes, his beard is magnificent.
Unfortunately, he does do most of his work digitally.
There we go.
You can print out a copy.
To the great lament. I think he does do some of the, like, where he will sell you a print that he promises and swears upon the heavens that will never be reprinted. That's a one-of-a-kind print and this and that. I'm not big on those just because by the nature of them, they're not a one-of-a-kind piece. But, I mean, to each their own. I'm not going to look like... I don't collect prints, but if you want to pay a lot of money for a print, like, it's your money. Do what you want to do. Go for it.
Does he do his covers on the?
He and Shaner both do covers. So
no, but I'm saying as an artist, are they not digital?
I think they are. He made
because I think even with some of these artists that just swear by digital, and some names that might surprise you. Like Dave Gibbons and Brian Boland in the current day, they still do their covers on. I think because of the marketplace for it.
That makes sense.
It's easier. You erase a hell of a lot less on a Cintiq.
Oh yeah, I can't imagine how much easier it is on that format when you're stuck on deadlines.
Layers. It's all about layers. Turn on all those layers.
Now, I'm not sure about Doc. I don't know if Doc is digital or if he is traditional or not.
He used to be traditional because I know I've seen pages of his up on the various sites, but and he's another one I would absolutely pay for good pages. But I think both of them, when they do shows, they will occasionally do commissions too.
Both of them will do. I mean, you're going to pay a lot for. You're going to pay a lot for Gerard's, but they will hook you up. I forget who Gerard's rep is. I don't think it's Felix. I'm not sure, but yeah, I mean they're up there. I mean, now that we've seen it, I kind of want a naughty fair play.
Naughty fair play.
So I'm trying to find it here. Garrett's. Oh, here it is. Garrett's actually for the Love Is Love special edition. He did a little Batman, sketch here in the side. So I do have at least one original.
That's awesome.
Garrett's thing. Oh, and yeah, he has a piece in here too. I believe he and maybe Tom does, but at least he did, I think.
Yeah, he's an ally. If you follow him on Twitter, if you just know him, and I think that's why him and Tom both get along great. They are very much. I think they both have a military background. I know Tom.
Yeah.
Military-esque. He was in the CIA, but I want to say Mitch does as well.
I thought he was an Army brat.
He might. That might be what it is.
I didn't think it was service. I thought it was. But I may be wrong. I don't know.
When he does like stuff on screen, a lot of times he'll wear one of the hats with the flag, which doesn't necessarily know, but it's kind of grunt gear. But they are both of that world, but they are both fairly liberal minded folks, and so that's one of the reasons they get along so well. They bonded over that, and they're just decent dudes all around.
All right. Well, you mentioned James, so for people who are watching, hi James, hi Jack.
Hello.
Glad to see you tuning in. We can transition over to Caleb then, if there's nothing else in regards to Strange Adventures. So, Caleb, tell us about something you're reading that you're digging.
So I went, had to go do some grocery shopping the other day, and near my grocery store there is a Barnes and Noble, and it wasn't crowded, so I put my little mask on and I journeyed into the Barnes and Noble and went through the comic section. Because I do that because I'm looking for stuff that doesn't come through the direct market. Like I like to get stuff that you don't see every day. So as I'm perusing the aisle, I see this book, and the spine of it catches my name. It's called Dragman. Other way. That's how words work. And so it catches my eye, and I'm like, Dragman. Is it about drag? Let me check it out. So I grab it, and I'm reading the back, and the first sentence kind of lays it out. August Crimp, who is the main character, he has a secret life. He likes to put on women's clothing. So I kind of quit reading at that. Picked it up, took it home. It's $28, a little pricey, but it's a thick book. You're getting a lot for $28. And so I sat down and started reading it. It's by Stephen Appleby. And if you're familiar with British media, British newspapers, that name is probably rings a bell for you. He has worked for The Guardian. He's worked for The Times. He's got a BBC radio show. Well, I may be using the wrong pronouns there. I'm not 1000% sure. But I'm just gonna use they. This book is a very complex, complicated book, and I wasn't really necessarily ready for how actually complex and complicated it gets. And if you're not in a place where you're ready to consider some nuance, or if you don't look up something about Stephen Appleby, there are parts in this that might make you kind of side-eye. Before I get into that, though, just what the story. It's a mystery. It's a crime story, and it's a superhero story. Not in the traditional sense, though. Augustus Grimp, who is the main character in this book, blurs the lines between trans, between gender non-binary, between what we used to call transvestism, a straight cisgender person who likes to put on women's clothes just for fun, to drag. It doesn't necessarily define it either way, because the character doesn't know. All that the character knows is that as a little boy, the character liked to put on liked traditional girl things, and his mother at the time shooed him away from those things. As a teenager, he found one of his mom's stockings in the couch, and he put the stocking on. It was titillating at first. It was kind of that edgy, like, oh, this is a little bit wrong, and it makes it feel good thing. But then he realized that when he puts on women's clothes, it gives him powers. He could fly. He gained super strength. And so he started to realize, and at the time, there was this emergence of superhero people in Augustus' world. And he lives in London. We don't really know the time era. We don't know the traditional sense of it, or how it equates to the world that we live in now. But basically, August, he became a superhero named Dragman. And he didn't start out that way. He just started going around in women's clothing, being very incognito and doing little things, saving a cat out of a tree, until people started noticing. And at the time, they kind of did the Civil War thing where you had to be licensed to be a superhero in this world. And the wrong people started noticing. While this was happening, he makes this friend, and her name was Dog Girl. And Dog Girl literally can transform herself into a dog. It's a play on words, because she's traditionally, they let you know in the book, she's not attractive. Like straight men don't find her attractive, and she doesn't give a shit at all. And she kind of takes that persona on. And the fact that she can change it to a dog, which is anamorphic and awesome. They become kind of a pair. And August doesn't pass, even with women's clothing. And that's where he's like, I don't know what I am. I don't know what world I fit into. Well, she convinces him, hey, come out to this club with me. And the club is a trans bar. It is a bar for people who are either trans or who are kind of looking for trans. At the time, it's talked about kind of like a kink bar. Which I don't know, which again, that's one of those things that you're like, do I really want to think of it that way? So they start playing back and forth, kind of playing fast and loose with this team up. Dog Girl helps Dragman get licensed to become a superhero, and this creates some problems. There's another superhero, kind of the big, I guess, the Superman analog to the story, called the Fist. And the Fist is, I'll see if I can find a picture of him. He is wearing this white, almost like a radiation suit with a giant heart on it. It's a very, very strange costume. He's very transphobic, very homophobic. Is not a good person. Like his outfit does not belie who he really is, and he's also very gatekeeperish. He doesn't want freaks. I'm using air quotes for the audio, and weirdos on his superhero team. He doesn't want anything to do with them. So he starts doing these things to kind of get Dragman August kicked out of the proverbial club. Well, August doesn't care. August just wants to do good things. And so, in the midst of trying to do good things, they realize that there has been a series of murders. And again, another thing that makes you kind of side eye everything is the series of murders. These are trans women who are getting killed. In trans stories, it's a trope. I'm not necessarily comfortable with it when it shows up because it's so prevalent in trans stories. Inevitably, that's the decision that was made with this story. And they start tracking down these murders. And what they realize is, in addition to these murders, and in part of this world, one thing that you can do is there is a way to separate the soul from the body, and they are literally selling souls on the black market, and that's one of the reasons that they're going after these people, because it's essentially it plays into the notion of two-spirit people, and they're getting something out of these souls, piggybacked on the idea that there are certain people who prey on trans people. So they start to track this down to figure it out. This is all, of course, complicated by the fact that August is a married man with a child. He is married to a woman. They have a son, and he very much wants to be a father figure. He very much is in love with his wife. His wife's name is Mary. And again, this plays with the idea that sexuality and gender are not particularly linked. And Mary does not know. His wife doesn't know he is what he is. She doesn't know that he is putting on women's clothing. She doesn't know that's a predilection he has. She doesn't know that he might be trans, that he might be something else. And all of that kind of culminates when their babysitter, in addition to the murders, comes to them and says, "Hey, my parents have sold their souls and they're acting weird. Come check it out." That leads them down a road that involves the worst kind of superheroes that you can imagine, police cover-ups, and figuring out who August is. It's a thick book. There's too much to get into. Like I said, it's a weird book because there's so much to it. I mean, it tracks down like a good novel will do. It goes in like 50 places, and then it all comes back in to the end. And August figures some things out. Dog Girl figures some things out. Inevitably, they save the day. Kind of. It's not necessarily a happy ending for all the characters, but it gets to a place of closure, at least for August, where August figures out what he wants out of life and kind of quits trying to fit into other people's boxes. Doesn't necessarily need to be trans, to be a trans woman, is comfortable with his male anatomy in a female persona, a female identity. Doesn't need to go, is not rushing out to have any kind of surgery, but also doesn't apologize for that. Is very, like, we would call August non-binary today. It took a lot narratively to get there. In the back of the book, and what kind of made me back away for some, like I said, not necessarily going about the book, as far as some of the takes that they do with showing at the time what they're considering a trans woman's male genitalia, because that is in the book, making some choices with the vernacular that they use. It's uncomfortable, but I think it's supposed to be. But as you're reading the back of the book, there's a little bit of a bio for Stephen Appleby. Stephen Appleby in the 60s started wearing women's clothes. In the 70s, started becoming a part of the transvestite community, which at the time, they didn't use the word transgender a lot. If you go back and you watch old documentaries of Marsha P. Johnson and the what we consider the trans community now, they call themselves transvestites. They don't call themselves transgender. They didn't use that vernacular. Stephen became part of that. Stephen does have a wife. Stephen does have a child in real life. There's a lot of August in Stephen. Stephen at the end of the book says that he himself personally, he doesn't come out and say, I identify as a trans woman. He does say that he dresses as a woman all the time. That's how he looks, identifies, and wants to go. But he never calls himself trans. I think he also leans into some of the non-binary mentality. There's a lot of biography to this book, and a really cool crime story, and a really cool adventure that winds in weird places and has really funky characters. And he's got a really neat style. It's that kind of style that you won't see in mainstream comics. It's very comics with an X to show some stuff. It's a weird, squiggly, heavy, knobby line, but you get gorgeous pages out of it.
That's very British. I feel like that style is very British kids comic-y. And I was reading about him. They do a lot of other comics.
Yeah,
just
reading this was like his first long form project basically ever. Yeah.
It does a lot of like political cartooning from what I understand. I thought it was a really it's I don't want to use the word unique because that book is like that word is overplayed, and inevitably when somebody uses the word unique, they mean it's like other things. It's like other things. All that other stuff. But it is a very niche book, and it's a very honest book. And for somebody like look, I'm a cis dude, like straight up. I don't know what it's. I have no idea what it's like to be trans. I respect people who go through that journey. That's a weight that. I think people who have to go through that journey have a lot of strength. But I also I've got friends who are non-binary, and it frustrates them because it feels like for those folks that they have to choose between being trans or being cis. And even people who who consider themselves of a modern age, they forget that there's a lot of fluidity to gender. And they try to put non-binary people in a box. Oh, well, you were born a man, but you wear woman's clothes. You must be a trans woman. No, sometimes I'm more masculine, sometimes I'm more feminine, and that's kind of the way August comes to look at it. You get that lesson, you get that nuance told through somebody who's also trying to figure out if they're a superhero or a family person, and how their family fits into their queerness, and how their relationships with other people. I mean, August does have sex with a man at one point. And it's not necessarily his thing. So he doesn't know where he fits or where they fit in on the queer spectrum, on the gay spectrum, or, if they are trans and they have a wife, does that make them a lesbian? But they're not quite trans. So is he something else? Genuinely, I just use the word queer, but it's a very, I can't say that I straight up I'm not going to tell people, oh my God, I love this book. Academically, I'm kind of fascinated by it. Like somebody could very easily write a gender studies dissertation about the work in here, and so much of it is based off of the life that somebody who's grown into the modern era and understanding of trans identity from the 60s, from before we started using the word trans, and actual trans people were just calling themselves transvestites. They have seen a lot of growth culturally, and some of that is spoken about in here, and some of that is not dealt with delicately, but I don't necessarily know that it needs to be. If it's their experience, they don't have to deal with it.
If it's authentic to their experience, I also agree. We get very caught up in the terminology that we currently use, but going back even 10, 15 years, the language to describe things was maybe less precise and certainly less what we would consider appropriate now, but people were trying to figure it out. Like Eddie Izzard, the whole time you were explaining this, I'm thinking Eddie Izzard. Eddie Izzard is someone who used to identify himself or themselves as a transsexual, transvestite actually, but executive transvestite. If you're familiar with his comedy from 15 years ago, that was the thing. But very recently, and even a few years back, started to embrace the transgender. Non-binary. I mean, really, that's when genderqueer and non-binary came about, because it's so messy for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so I love that they and I mean,
messy or fluid.
Who? Well, both.
I said, is it messy or
I
is
think
it
it's a little
fluid?
bit of
Or yeah, I guess
both,
it could be
because
both,
some
yeah.
people, that fluidity can become messy in a not pejorative, but messy in a it's hard to contain, and so fluidity is probably the more positive word for that. And for like Caleb, you're saying, like for a cisgender, gay man, it's a harder concept to wrap your head around. But you don't have to scratch the surface. I just on Facebook the other day, one of my comics friends, formerly Dean, now Mayday Trip, came out as non-binary, and like it's because the terminology is now kind of coalescing, and that there are these terms that people can use to explore that. It's allowing people to go, actually I'm non-binary, or because I actually have had these experiments, and or I like being this more feminine, I like being this more masculine, and regardless of the sexuality, that's like its whole other thing. Like this is to them critical to their identity.
Well, that's what we always hear for the coming out story, especially if you have a bad experience. Like I didn't have a good coming out experience. I heard you're just confused, and it took me over a decade to get to this point. But what you finally realize is, no, I'm not confused. I was never confused. The constraints that society puts on us that tells us we have to be a certain way makes us confusing. Like we're not confused. The world and the experience is just confusing because other people can't wrap their heads around the fact that we don't fit into their box.
Exactly.
I think that's the most important. Like that's it. Side note: I found the fist.
Oh,
he also flies around in a love puck. So it's some parts of this, and that's the neat thing about this book, and that's the neat thing about what Stephen Appleby does with it. Some parts are very tongue in cheek, very tongue in cheek, off the cuff, and then other parts are very cerebral. There's a lot of depth to it. It goes to some incredibly well thought, almost gender and queer theory involved in it, and he can pull it back and forth so quickly that you're just like, well, how did you just go from that to a fart joke, literally, and it doesn't feel like a hiccup. So yeah, like if you want something that's more serious, something that's not necessarily going to be a quote unquote fun read, but something that if academics is fun to you, or if the exploration of identity is fun, you're gonna love this book. Like it's just really, really cool. And now I'm kind of fascinated by Stephen Appleby's life, and I want to know so much more about them. I actually tweeted at him earlier, and this is like I tweeted, and because I went and found Stephen on Twitter, and I was hoping that their pronouns were listed, and they weren't. So again, if by some magic of the internet, like somebody searches a name and they're like, "Oh, you used the wrong pronouns," I'm not actually sure what pronoun Stephen goes by, and so I don't mean to be disrespectful at all to what they want to do, but if you can find this book, it's good shit.
And the publisher is Macmillan?
Metropolitan Books.
Okay.
Is what's on my copy. Now I don't know, that may be an American version of Macmillan, maybe, who published it in the UK originally, but
no, it is on. You can access information from the Macmillan website here.
Okay.
So it looks like Metropolitan Books is a sub imprint of Henry Holt and Company, which in turn is a subprint of Macmillan. So major publisher behind it, however you look at it.
Amanda was asking, Dragman is the name of the book. So, and congratulations to Amanda. Her and a really good friend of mine named Eric just got married.
Oh, so, congratulations.
Wonderful, wonderful people.
Oh, thank you for that, Caleb. That looks like a very interesting book and nothing I had heard of before.
I'd never seen it.
I was familiar with the name Stephen Appleby because of a connection to Genesis Porridge from Throbbing Gristle, who naturally operates within trans circles. So that was a familiar name, but I think more, as you had mentioned, on the pop culture commentary end, for lack of a better term. So it's going to make me pull out Records of Civilization, because now I got to remember how they connected. All right, I guess it's my turn.
Oh,
All
yeah.
right, God, I got to follow that now. All right, great. So I got a stack of comics here. See
Look at
that
that stack.
stack? You know what the stack is? This is
Thick,
my
looks like a
stack of
mountain.
free comic book day books. So, as I was waiting rather impatiently for a particular shipment to go out, um, we'll just leave it at that.
Yep.
One thing I have been doing consistently every week is going to one of my local shops, Steve's Comic Relief in Lawrenceville, New Jersey. They are doing the free comic book days on Saturdays instead of the Wednesdays when the books actually have their release dates. But the Free Comic Book Day initiative is going on until September 9th this year. It's Free Comic Book Day Summer. I do recommend that, provided you're in a safe situation, that you go out and support your local comic book stores. And, every time I go in there, I'm walking out with something else that I wasn't expecting to walk out with. But I just wanted to go through some of the books that I had. One of the offerings was the first issue of The Resistance. And Steve, I know that you had talked about Upshot. One thing I wasn't aware of was that this was a connected universe, and that this is basically the first book that comes out that lays some of the framework for where this universe stands.
Yeah, the Resistance, I think the superhero part is connected, but I don't know so much of the other books that are part of the AWA family,
Yeah.
like Old Haunts and Bad Mother and things like that. I think
It does say that Moths definitely is.
Yeah, the whole thing is supposed to tie in. Now, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken, Axel Alonso is behind AWA.
He's the EIC
And-
with
Yeah,
Bill
and
Jemis
all
behind the publisher.
all of it is going to mesh. Even Hotel, which doesn't seem like it could, all of it is supposed to wrap in at some point.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to think, though, because you have a title like Year Zero, which is about a zombie apocalypse that kills everybody.
Yeah.
And then you have Resistance, which you're going to talk about, Bill. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you also think like all those cross-gen titles were connected. If people forget that some of these stories like Ruse didn't take place on Earth, it may be a situation like that, whether it's parallel universes or something along those lines. But in terms of The Resistance, the writer is J. Michael Straczynski, and has anybody gotten his autobiography? Because I've only heard really positive things about it. I heard it's a harrowing read about his childhood, but it's a very well crafted book. The artist by Mike Deodato Jr. Deodato is somebody I dig because they frame their artistic style for the book to the particular writer. You can't compare this to Artemis in the 90s. You know what he's doing here. Some really nice work. So the background in The Resistance is that there is a plague.
Timely.
That wipes out 400 million people and then disappears. But in the wake, 5% of the population end up with superpowers. Now, I haven't gotten too far into the whole superpowers thing yet, since basically the first issue lays out the societal and political framework that you're going to see the rest of the story operate from. It was an uncomfortable read, given what we're dealing with right now, but it was very well crafted. And I don't think I'm going to be a monthly reader, but if the books are sensibly priced at the trade level, I think at the very least I'll get the trade for this. Maybe that'll get me into some other stuff. But I did definitely like it, Upshot. Another one that I read, this is Archie, Blue Ribbon Presents. And it's split between Riverdale, The Ties That Bind, and Betty and Veronica, The Bond of Friendship. These are both original graphic novels, much like the DC, Zoom, and Ink lines that are happening right now. The Riverdale is definitely squarely fits into continuity of this last season. It wasn't very interesting. The Betty and Veronica, though, I thought was really interesting. It's a very nice artistic style. This is by Brittany Williams, and I just like this particular. I'll give you a shot there of Betty, Veronica, and Kevin Keller, right there. Just a really nice style to fit the characters. Basically, the concept is there's a career day, at least what's in the framework of the sneak preview. It's a career day at Riverdale, and Betty and Veronica are going. Naturally, they have much different perceptions of where they want to go in their careers, but there is a senator who talks, and Veronica basically is transformed after hearing her story, I might pick this up.
Hmm.
It was very well done. The Riverdale is boring. I don't care, but I did like the Betty Veronica. Also, the Dark Horse. I think Dark Horse has 2 titles that are coming out, but this is one. This is Critical Role Vox Machina Origins. I was lost. If anybody can tell me what the hell Critical Role is, it would be greatly appreciated. But the backup is Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology, and this was long delayed, but the solicits finally came up for later September. The artist is P. Craig Russell, and let me just give you some shots there of some of his stuff. I remember that there was some comment that in the pages of the letter columns of Tempest that Phil Jimenez was the first openly. It was basically the first coming out in a mainstream comic. I seem to remember P. Craig Russell being open about his sexuality far earlier than that. So I don't know if anyone has the framework for that. It may have been like a Fantagraphics interview or something, but Russell has a very distinct style that definitely fits the Norse mythology. I mean, he's probably the only artist that's done operatic adaptations for comic books. I don't think any other creator has touched that. But look at this take on Odin.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah,
it's something very different from you would see from the most traditional mainstream comics. It's done in a style where there's no word balloons. It's almost like full narration, and for something like Norse mythology, that really works. So I pre-ordered the first few issues, and I'm excited about that. So another one where at least one of the 2 is worthwhile.
Hey, Bill, just real quick, you were asking what Critical Role is. So Critical Role is an online web series. There are these like kind of famous voice actors that all get together and play D&D online.
Okay.
And they've got they're kind of a big cult following.
I was lost. I had no idea what was going on.
It's like it's my circle's version of MST3K, I think, because like there's a shit ton of Critical Role stuff. It's very in depth and involved, and if you're not familiar with it, then
so it's basically MST3K for RPGs.
Pretty much, yeah. I don't know that it's quite as extensive, but same ballpark.
Yeah,
satirical commentary on different quests and things like that, basically by the players themselves.
Well, and just lots of voice actors getting drunk and rolling dice.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
And Bill, about P. Craig Russell, I mean, didn't he's worked with Gaiman before. I think he did the Ramadan.
Oh, yeah, he did the art for Ramadan. We talked about last week.
Yeah, So
he's one of the highlights of the Sandman run.
So, having him work again with Gaiman for Norse mythology, which was his last really big prose release a few years back, that's pretty cool. That's really nice that they got to work together again.
And there's a great story about Russell with a Doctor Strange annual from 1976. And I believe this is Mark Andreyko's first comic book work. I may be wrong on that, but I think it is. There was an annual written by Marv Wolfman, and it was very rushed. There was very much a rush to get this annual out. And Russell didn't feel that the story, which I believe he plotted, and the art weren't up to the standards that he was hoping. And then in the 90s, he got a chance to redo it. So I think it's called What Is It That Bothers You, Stephen? And not many people get a second chance at a work like that. So that's something where I've always meant to seek that out. I have the original annual, but I don't have the remix in the 90s. And I do believe the scripter in that version is Mark Andreyko. And I do believe if that's not his first comic book work, it might be. Oh yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so James was chiming in with, he's done a lot of Gaiman's work, Murder Mysteries, which I have on my shelf somewhere. The Graveyard Book.
Murder Mysteries was such a great, beautiful little graphic novella.
What is it that disturbs you, Stephen? Thank you. I was real close. And like I said, I believe it's Mark Andreyko's first comic book work. If it isn't, it's really close to Torso. It's really close in time to that. So might be worth seeking out.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
And he's a very sweet guy if you ever meet him. Very, very sweet guy. Very quiet, sweet guy.
So Bill, since you've been looking at and been getting a lot of the Free Comic Book Day issues, if it feels a little bit different because it's so spread out, not every book is available.
Oh yeah, there's no sense of event to it.
Yeah.
But we can't have events.
No. Even something like this that's very,
Yeah, I do appreciate that they still got these books out there and didn't do something like, oh, we'll do it next year. I'm glad they found release in some context, and also that there isn't one designated day. They don't run certain risks.
Yeah.
By having it in that format, and I think that's greatly appreciated.
Well,
and look, I'm going into that store, and I never go into that store. Before this, I would go into that store maybe 2-3 times a year.
To that point, not that it's to the same scope, because for my LCS, Free Comic Book Day is a major event. It brings in a lot, it's a significant percentage of his annual income.
Yeah, I think there's many stores where that's the circumstance.
Not to the same scope, but he is being able to utilize this. The store owner is to get folks in. Like I said, not to the same extent, but he is advertising, hey, we've got these free comics, and instead of only allowing person A to get 4 to 6 free comics, if you come in every week and you can get it, you can have the whole set. But you got to come in every week, and I mean that you're spending money. So they're still being able to use it in some fiduciary capacity, just not with the full financial impact that it did have, which is unfortunate right now for especially. But
well, kind of along with that too, not just sort of what Free Comic Day brings for the stores, but how about Free Comic Book Day does advertise for the different publishers as well. They want to feature some of their big titles that are coming up, or maybe some of their big titles that they are selling now that they want to spread the word on. Do you think that message is lessened when it's spread out over time, especially because some of these Free Comic Book Day, promotional issues are coming out at about the same time, or being released or read the same time that the actual comic that it was promoting is now going on sale, or has been pushed indefinitely? I mean, we're thinking about and of course there are a lot of other circumstances around it, but DC's big 5G,
that's canceled.
Generation Zero thing got canceled completely.
Got canceled. Yeah.
But if the COVID-19 shutdown didn't happen, even with Dan DiDio getting booted, do you think it would have still been released?
Not given those circumstances with the corporate changes now. And I also do appreciate that they did put it out there. It is added to the Flash Forward collection. So if you really want to read it, you can read it.
What it was, or it's supposed to be. But I don't know. Like, how do you think? How do you think? Well,
I think it's complicated. I think there are advantages by having these sputtered releases. That it's not all of the 40 books or whatever at one time. So, maybe there are people coming in that wouldn't otherwise grab something like Richard Fairgray Monster Showcase and would normally get Spider-Man, So I think some of the more independent-minded books may be advantageous for them. There's no sense of real event behind it, but it's there. I don't know how they would gauge it. I think probably with the losing the Generation 5 or whatever the fuck that thing was called, probably the highest prestige book that's part of this is Firepower.
Yeah,
that was such a weird rollout anyway. With the original graphic novel and then the series, it's confusing to somebody who's like a layman.
It's apparently how Kirkman has been rolling the past couple of years, though. It's like, surprise, ending the biggest title I've ever published. Surprise, here's a new title that you don't get unless you ordered a crap ton of this other title that I had.
As I said, I'm very glad it's still out there. And also, since you fellas are much younger than me, did you ever play Chex Quest?
No, but I know about it.
Do you know about it though? There was a video game that was included in the Chex cereals.
Yeah,
I never.
We didn't get it because we didn't buy a lot of sugary cereals or cereals with prizes because they cost more apparently.
What platform was it out for?
Oh, it was a PC.
It wasn't a sugary cereal at all.
No, it was Chex. Yeah.
Was it like on a floppy?
Said not Chex.
Like a CD.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So I could have played it. I didn't.
So anyway, I just want to let you know that one of the added Free Comic Book Days is a Chex Quest comic. that is coming out, and the creators include Tom Scioli. So it sounds pretty wild. If you go over to freecomicday.com, they have pictures, and it sounds pretty interesting.
Oh, what was
But,
it? Was it
since you fellows were younger than me, figured I would check in with
What-
you about Chex
what-
Quest.
What's a floppy?
what's your checks? No,
I was
we were a Crispix household, so checks like didn't usually factor in. But speaking of like younger readers, one of the Free Comic Book Day issues that I picked up, which I normally wouldn't have, because again, I focus on like the big titles when they're sitting on the giant table with everything. Was the Stranger Things Dark Horse release, and it was a cute. It was very much reminded me of an 80s or 90s tie-in to a movie or a property that was probably a little bit more serious than what the tie-in comic book would usually present. The comic book in this case, the story is very much more juvenile than Stranger Things as a show is. So, but it was fun. It was a fun, quick read. But the second story in there was Minecraft, the comic book, which I never got into Minecraft. I've played Minecraft Dungeons, and I think it's a ton of fun. But turning that concept into a fun, plot-driven comic book is interesting, and it's interesting how they did it. It reminded me very much reading that comic, or the comic insert in the Free Comic Book Day, of the old Rubik's Cube cartoon from the 80s, if anybody remembers that. Like, how do you turn a puzzle, and literally a block-shaped puzzle, like Minecraft, being all block-shaped, how do you turn that into a fun, story-driven cartoon? They can do it, and it seemed fun. It was a fun, cute little comic issue that I was not expecting to pleasantly enjoy. I won't be following the series or anything, but I thought it was kind of a cute little like. How do you do that? I
can't say that the Stranger Things comics, by and large, have been pretty good. I haven't read this last one, but for exploitation tie-ins, they're not bad.
That's good. Yeah. Yay for exploitation.
How often do you get to say that word? All right. Well, I guess we should start wrapping up. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Caleb.
Before we get to the Wolves of the Week, can I just have a second?
Yes. I was going to get to it after them, but please, you have the floor. And
I don't want to end on a low note. So for those of you who follow my adventures in the real world, I'm a law student. Law school is kicking back up this next week. I start my first classes on Monday, and for anybody who has done law school, it's kind of hell. So with that being said, this is going to be my last regular weekly appearance for a little bit. I'm not going away forever. The guys have been gracious enough to say, hey, if you got a night you want to pop on, just let me pop on. But I'm not going to be on here every week, kind of like I have been for the last couple of months. So to you guys and to the Bear family, the Comic Book Bear family, I want to say thank you for letting me spend time on here each week talking comics. I absolutely love it. You guys are a big part of my heart. I have enjoyed this so much. And like I said, not going away forever. We'll still be around, still pop in, every once in a while, a little from time to time. But you guys made me feel at home. You guys made me feel amazing. And we talk all the time anyway, so that's not the thing. But I love you dearly, and I can't wait to get back in here with you guys. So
well, again, we hope it's sooner rather than later. There may be a night where you're just screw it. I'm coming on.
Listen, if you like this and you're interested in things I have to say, you can also come listen to Southern Fried Geekery. So. Not that I don't pitch that too much on the show. But.
Yeah, and all I can say, Caleb, is, coming from somebody that, when I went to law school, I was holding down a full-time day job and going at night, 4-year track. I definitely can appreciate how much of a time suck. Yeah. It's your life. It's your life while you're in it. And don't forget the comics. That's the main thing.
Oh. I don't watch TV. So where other people will like to go off and watch TV, they would relax. I just read comics. So that's all I wanted to say. I think I'm getting proposed to in the chat thing. I'm not 1,000% sure. But
I don't know what that's about either. But,
Already taken though.
I love to be loved, so yeah, that's all
Yeah.
good. But
Hey,
again,
I love it too. Paul McCartney syndrome. Yeah.
thank you guys, seriously.
Yeah.
And I'll be back on soon.
You sent a reminder to us today, and then for some reason, like after that came in, I could not stop singing "See You in September." I could not, or lose you to a summer love. So you had a very strange influence on me today on that too. But we will see you down the road and in that square at some point. I hopefully am speaking for Steve and Bryan to say that these past few months have been a pleasure having you here as a soundboard, and your input to the show has been wonderful. You not being a regular part of the show, there is comfort knowing that isn't a hard stop. The seat's always open for you in the cave or whatever the fuck.
You guys are awesome.
All right. So
Box form.
All right, we're moving on to the Woofs of the Week. When we wrap up an episode of the Comic Book Bears, we do so with a segment we call the Woofs of the Week segment. This is where we signify something. It might be a comic book, but it also might be a film or a TV series or a charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener or viewer, may be interested in sampling. I'll start, as I always do, with Steve. Steve, what is your Woof of the Week?
My Woof of the Week is something I've been looking forward to for a very long time, since I first saw the trailer, the preview, way back months ago on HBO for their series Lovecraft Country. I have been excitedly looking forward to the series, and it did have its premiere this past Sunday, which was, I believe, the 16th. And I was not disappointed. In fact, if you're looking for Cthulhu, Cthulhu gets thrown out in the first 30 seconds of this movie. In a beautiful sequence that's a surrealist, Korean War thrown together with War of the Worlds, with giant Cthulhu, and Jackie Robinson shows up. Actually slays Cthulhu very interestingly with a baseball bat, which is very cool. The whole thing, amazing. John Carter of Mars gets thrown in there, very early on. And then the main character wakes up, played by Jonathan Majors, who is a UNCSA, UNC School of the Arts, here in Winston-Salem alumnus, that my husband actually was in school with.
No way.
Yeah, I think he worked with them on one small play or something. But
Cool.
But yeah, it was really exciting to see somebody from here, or at least who went to school here. On such a major series on HBO and HBO Max. You've also got Journey Smollett, who played Black Canary in the recent Birds of Prey movie. She's amazing. She plays his friend and also fellow sci-fi pulp nerd. And then also Courtney B. Vance plays his uncle. The plot, very quickly, it's based on the book Lovecraft Country, where Jonathan Majors' character, his father goes missing, related somehow to his mother's heritage and his family's heritage. So you don't really know too much about that, but he decides to accompany his uncle, who is a compiler or author of a green book-like travel guide for African Americans in the 50s. And of course, Letitia, his friend played by Journey Smollett, comes along to help with the driving and also to break up the thing as they head east into Massachusetts, which is also known as Lovecraft Country, trying to find the father. And it's very eye-opening. It has a very similar feel to maybe the first episode of Watchmen, if you remember sort of the impact on that, and the very in-your-face, not shy at all representation of the United States at this time period. And, a lot of people might be shocked and surprised that in the Midwest and the Northeast, there were still sundown towns, and there were still heavy amounts of racism. You don't have to have stars and bars flag flying. You don't have to have, a deep South accent, to represent something that they, that you might expect. You might not expect this. And Caleb, that was not a notch your accent.
But if you do have a deep South accent, that also doesn't mean that you're that way.
Exactly. Do not take that. But the tropes that you normally see on TV is like, this would be something that you would see in like Tennessee. And I'm getting the wrap up from Billy. But anyway, but I have to say, it is amazing. It's wonderful, and of course, hits you back with the horror and the Lovecraftian nature in the last quarter of the episode. It is great. It's wonderful. It's a wild ride. But I totally recommend it. So I'm moving on.
Okay. Great. And that is HBO, not HBO Max, correct?
It is on HBO, but if you have HBO Max, of
Max,
course
you can get it. But it is being released episodically.
Yes.
Okay, great. Moving on to Bryan. Bryan, what is your wolf of the week?
I also enjoyed Lovecraft Country, by the way. Very good show. Good recommendation. Another show, you may not be keeping up with the late night shows. They're in kind of a weird phase where they don't have audiences, so they're doing these like as shot at home or as shot in a studio office. But it's very interesting the way they're doing these shows right now. But one of the shows that is transitioning back, I think, to a studio, maybe office setting from a home setting is Late Night with Seth Meyers. And I will say that I have not always been a Seth Meyers fan. I think some of his writing at SNL, I just didn't like it at the time. And even when he was the host of what's the news show in SNL? Weekend Update. I didn't always gel. I just, for whatever reason, it didn't work for me then. But let me just tell you, his closer looks, which are all up on YouTube, and of course, NBC, I'm sure, has it somewhere too, of course. They are hilarious. They are topical. They always are like a little bit of a deep dive through issues going on in politics, mostly with Trump right now and COVID. But what's delightful is he's incorporated these ridiculous segments and sort of ongoing character bits. There's like the sea captain. There is this wooden duck that sounds like Ira Glass. There is a drug addicted fish. Now there's a mermaid, a smoking kind of gravelly voiced mermaid. Like, he's accumulated these weird characters because I guess they're like found objects at his mother-in-law or his in-law's house that he's been staying at. And I just overall, like this whole summer this whole COVID period that he's been in this mode, between him and Stephen Colbert, the humor has been spectacular, very homespun, very, kind of family made, featuring their families because they're living there, with these ridiculous bits. Highly recommend if you just want a little bit of like a 10-minute segment. It'll frustrate you, it'll piss you off, but it'll also make you laugh really hard. So Seth Meyers, Late Night, check him out.
Yeah. There's some very funny stories about Colbert's sons who were doing the shooting of his segments. They had to become CBS employees. And
really?
They were actually far more versed about the benefits than he was. There's a very funny article out there about that. It was really cute. Yeah. All right. Over to Caleb. Caleb, what is your wolf of the week?
So my wolf of the week has been hanging out over my shoulder all night. And that is this awesome, made to make your bookshelf look awesome, giant book called Flapper Queens. And this is it's a collection of comic strips done by women cartoonists of the Jazz Age. And it is put together by the amazing Trina Robbins. Huge fan of Trina, and
that's awesome.
Everything that Trina does. But it's a collection. Like, we talk about it all the time that women have always been a huge part of the comics industry. Always. Like they don't necessarily haven't gotten the attention and the spotlight shine on them. And this collects some of the amazing work that women cartoonists were doing in the 20s. And up through
it's just the 1920s?
I think so. Because I haven't had a chance to read this yet. I literally just got it in today. But it says, just the back of it says, in the 1920s, the figure of the flapper with her bobbed hair and angular elbows and knees seemed to exist in a perpetual euphoric state of the Charleston. Eisner Award-winning historian Trina Robbins curates this collection of comic strips by the Flapper Queens, women cartoonists who graced magazines and newspapers with images of the thoroughly modern Millie enjoying her newfound feminist freedom. It includes strips by Neil Brinkley, Eleanor Shore, Edith Stevens. It's mostly through the 20s and 30s, is what it says. So I think it does get out of the 20s a little bit. but still, I mean, it's amazing. And so for somebody who, I think me and Bill talk about this all the time. A lot of folks just want to read the comics that come out today. I love history. I love comics history. Everything from like the inception of sequential art. I geek out over it. So when I saw this, I had to have it. Like I said, number one, you can see from my bookshelf back there, I love shelf porn. So if a book looks like I'm all about it. But this thing is freaking huge, and it's cool. So I'm happy to have it in my collection now.
Okay, cool. I'm just noticing. Yeah, I'm one of those weird people whose eye color changes, and it's with this different light system. Man, my blue eye. My eyes are blue. Like,
Blue?
Jesus. Yeah,
Blue within blue.
Yeah. All right.
Confreminon. What's going on?
Let's talk about me. Why talk about you when we can talk about me? Okay. So my wolf of the week goes out to a book that I picked up at one of those store convention, like a convention in a mall. It's called the Great Antiques. I don't know what the hell it's called. It's in New Jersey over here. And this is a book called The Force of Star Wars. Unlocking the Mystery of the Force. Bet y'all didn't know that Emperor Palpatine is Satan and Ben Kenobi is Jesus Christ. And the Force is God. And probably my favorite, Princess Leia Organa and the Alliance are the Israeli remnant of the end times. This was published in 1977. There actually are Star Wars pictures, and I guess because these photos were released as promotional, that there was a legal way that they could obtain them. But it's a book by a Christian publisher called Bible Voices in Van Nuys, California. And it's fucking crazy.
That is such a gem. Oh my God, Bill. So jealous.
Yeah. $1. I got this for $1.
Worth every penny.
With a copyright 1977. I can safely say I've never read a book like this.
Oh my God.
I'm about halfway through it, and there are parts that I think were just like cut and paste. This is a very quick exploitive book, 77, the turnaround time with Star Wars hitting, and I wouldn't be surprised if they just maybe they did one for Planet of the Apes and they just changed the names or something. It's wild. Oh. This guy's theories about oh my God. The writer is Frank Allnutt.
Allnutt?
Allnutt, Allnutt. His other books include a biography of Henry Kissinger and a book called Antichrist After the Omen. I'm so glad I picked this up.
I've got to find a copy of that for Craig.
I was going to say, is Chris Cummins aware of this book?
Yes, and he loves it. Oh my
gosh,
too.
Bill. So I just found a website. It's frankallnutt.com. So I think this is his website. He has a first edition copy, never distributed. He is selling it for $500.
I paid $1.
Is it signed?
Oh my gosh, this guy is still alive and publishing. Frankly speaking, he's got articles he's written. Most recent article, UFOs, friends or foe?
Oh,
like gold. I just put his link up in the chat.
I see what he did there.
He does wood burning art. He sells old sewing machines. This man, he is a Renaissance. He is a Renaissance man. Holy God. These are fantastic.
Okay, so here we're going to discover the many joys of following Frank Allnutt. Great.
Yeah. Does he have a gram?
No, this site looks like it's a little out of date. And he's big into flowers. Wow.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap this one up for good. Again, we are the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. If you want to listen to us, you can do so by downloading us through iTunes. I'm barely getting through this here, folks. You can listen to us through Stitcher Radio and some of the other podcatching platforms. I got the giggles. And if you want to write to us, please do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. Please leave a review if you are listening to us through iTunes. Please leave a comment if you are watching us through YouTube. I understand this is our first broadcast through Twitch. right,
Yes,
Bryan?
Twitch, Comic Book
And
Bears
also,
on Twitch.
thank you to everybody that joined us for the Facebook Live stream of this. We do appreciate those numbers. We do appreciate that input. Thank you so much. Until next time, I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Bryan Pittard.
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
You're going to hear a wolf and an explosion. We'll be back real soon. Take care, everyone.
Wolf.